Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Teaching Music Tomorrow. My name is Victoria Bowler, and I am here with Anne Molesky. And this episode, we get to continue our discussion of apple tree, but looking on a more like umbrella macro level, we're having conversations about how we can take some familiar songs and maybe approach them with some different pathways. If these are songs that have gotten maybe a little bit stale in your teaching, or maybe you've just learned it, like maybe you're new inside the classroom and maybe you've just learned it with one activity. And so now we get to talk about some of the different options that we have for kind of reimagining these standard pieces of rep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so often, at least for myself, when I've learned something in a levels course or, it's kind of been passed on to me or I found it written in a resource, I'm like, okay, this is how it goes. Like, this is the way that it is. And I think that there's ways to extend what you're doing with something pedagogically that still kind of stays true to sources, intention, and all that good stuff that we want to be really concerned about, right? So thinking about these, as you mentioned last episode, tried and true, we're trying to make them a little bit more fresh and new, right? So today we are going to be sharing some rhythmic ideas with apple tree. And so Victoria is going to kick us off. But if you haven't listened to kind of how we did the game, go back and listen to that episode. That kind of sets the stage for probably, I'm assuming, what's going to happen today on this episode. So
great. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into my rhythmic activity, and I have a new umbrella thing to kind of add to our other umbrella topic. So I want to talk about depth of knowledge with this. This is a writing activity with rhythm. Writing activities for me are pretty rare. Like I'll do I'm a big fan of like put your finger in the air and like show me your idea, whatever. But as far as like paper and pencil writing, those activities do not see a lot of light of day in my classroom. But when they do, I want to think about a depth of knowledge level. So this is from a nice gentleman named Webb was his last name. And he kind of codified this system in the 90s. And it is a question of what do students need to know, but more importantly, how deeply do they need to know it? So in this activity, students need to know that in this class, one sound on a beat is ta, and we write it with a quarter note. And in this class right now, two sounds on a beat are toddy, and we write them with two beamed eighth notes. And that's what they need to know. But what level of knowledge am I asking of them when we do an activity? So a level 1 depth of knowledge activity for rhythm writing, this is not for music in general, but like very, very specifically writing, could be that they are just copying notation. And that would be a level 1 because they just need to kind of reproduce the knowledge. And oftentimes that's where we stop and say like, great, they know it. And it's true, they do, but how deeply do they know it? So we could also go to a level 2, like a level deeper, which would be students are using their knowledge to solve a problem. So if you are going to take a known song and I want you to write it from the board, but I leave a measure blank and you have to fill it in. You have to use your knowledge to kind of solve that empty measure. It's a song you know, and you can figure it out, but you have to kind of do that piece of it on your own. If we want to go a little bit further, we can do a level 3 strategic thinking where we are going to analyze material using our content knowledge. So if we were to do this in a writing activity, again, I'm only specifically talking about writing. I don't mean to say like this is level 3 for all music, general music activities we would do, but specifically with writing, we might ask students to find the notation on the board and then correct it. And then they have to explain their thinking. How do they know that they have arrived at the correct answer? We also might ask them to dictate a new rhythmic phrase that they have never heard before. So it's a lot of like moving it into a different context, and then students need to explain how they got to their answer. And then level 4 would be extended thinking. This is something that would likely in our classrooms, just given the limited amount of time that we have, would take more than one class period. So they are going to kind of extend their knowledge. And again, we are moving things into a new context. And then again, just to reiterate, it probably will take more than one class. So we're thinking like a little bit more project based. So a lot of our notation of original ideas could fall into this category, depending on how you do it. If students are coming up with an original idea first and then writing it down, that could fall into a level 4 extended thinking. If they're copying from like a rhythm bank onto a composition worksheet and they're just copying, even though it is, it would have composition at the top of the worksheet, that would actually be a level 1 depth of knowledge because they're just copying it into their rhythm block, choosing from their rhythm bank. Okay, so all of that huge extension, and for me to ramble about to say, here's my apple tree rhythm activity. So I might ask you to sing the song and play the game, and then I might say, Anne, what do you think we can make with all of these apples? What do you think?
Cobbler.
You're right. Cobbler. Cobbler, or I might say, do you mean like an apple cobbler? Probably, presumably.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, maybe an apple cobbler, or you might say, nope, just regular cobbler. I say, okay, great, cobbler. That's fine. What else could you make?
Applesauce.
You're right. Applesauce. Great. So we have some things that we can layer in as Austinati. Okay, so then eventually I'm going to narrow us down to a list on the board of apple pie, apple pudding, baked apples, and cider. And if you're following along in your ORF handbooks, you'll recognize these as our standard rhythmic building blocks. So these are just Kate Mond's regular rhythmic building blocks that we would expect to see, in any old ORF classroom. So with a partner, students are going to kind of clap the rhythm of the words on the board, and they're going to figure out the rhythms by ear. So let's do that together. Apple pie. Two steady beats in apple pie. But the long and short sounds kind of fall on them differently. Next one is apple pudding. Still 2 steady beats, but the long and short sounds are different. Next is baked apples. And the last one is cider. Okay, so that's something that I would expect first grade students to be able to do, especially with a partner.
Right.
And then with some blank cards cut out, students are going to and this could be anything. Like I have blank cards that you can use because this will be a rhythmic building block activity where they're making their own rhythmic building blocks. But you can also... I do this in a pinch, just to hand out blank paper to everyone and say, like, draw your grid and write it like this, So you can either have like a nice printable, or it's fine if you don't. It's all good. Students are going to write the rhythms that they have just decoded by ear. And then once they have their cards written out of their rhythms that they decoded, then they get to choose the order that they're going to rearrange them and create a new rhythm with their partner. So let me give us a visual of this. I'll share my screen. Yeah, let's share this one. So this would be what students see on the board, just apple pie, apple pudding, baked apples, cider. And they don't have any hints at where the beat is and where the rhythmic durations are on top of the beat. And that's just because of the level of thinking that I want them to kind of connect here. Sure. If I wanted to make it easier, I would definitely give them 2 steady beats, and I would put apple on top of one line and I would put pie on top of the other one. And that would be a beautiful, beautiful transition. So then eventually this next slide, this is what their rhythms will look like when they've written them correctly. And so then they've made their own rhythmic building blocks with their partner. I'm going to stop the share. They've made their own rhythmic building blocks with their partner. Everybody has the same rhythmic building blocks, but then together they are going to rearrange those to create their own rhythmic combinations. Yeah. So there is writing, there's like a decoding element to this, but then it's not paper and pencil writing. It's still writing, but now you're going to do it with the rhythmic building blocks, you and your partner. So we're looking at a familiar rhythm with apple tree. But then the apple pie, apple pudding, all of those things, those are all completely unknown. We haven't put them in the context of the song necessarily. So you're writing the rhythms by ear without any reference to existing notation on the board. And then you're notating your own order of cards. So that's like you have to originate the idea and then write it down, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's a very long-winded, sorry about that, Anne. That's a very long-winded depth of knowledge. And I would consider that a level 3 depth of knowledge activity.
Yeah, I have many thoughts. So what's interesting, well, I have a very similar activity, but it's fine. So the first thing I was thinking as you were talking about the rhythmic building blocks is if my students saw boxes, they would automatically assume that's one beat. But then you did say that you would go through like saying the text and tapping and saying, oh, yes, that's two steady beats. Like somehow those words are organized that way. And then also you were talking about putting the beat blanks underneath if students needed that support, which I think is helpful. But I think that you probably, I'm assuming, but you use that so much in your classroom, those building blocks, that they're used to knowing that a box that way, especially with you emphasizing that it's two beats, is two beats, right? It's not necessarily a beat blank.
So, yeah. So when I say boxes, like I have these just handy. So I have like this one. Can you see this?
Yeah.
That is Tideo, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a regular rhythmic building block. So when they are in boxes, but it's just like it would be like cards that they're used to getting anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so like
absolutely.
yes to the box, but it's not. I haven't ever had students confuse it with like a rhythm, a beat box.
Like a
but
beat
you're
box.
totally a beat box. But you're totally right that something that you would need to kind of think about. Like if they see the box on the board and they're used to associating it with, like one steady beat, then yeah, you would want to back up. But this is just like a 1-to-1, like the box is the card kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love this because you have, again, the apple pie, because apple tree wasn't in there. The apple pie is kind of like the equivalent, right? And as you were talking about the different levels of writing, I was thinking about how when I teach Kodai levels and I'm speaking with students about, how we have our iconic representation, and then like the early form is going from icons to, or early practice rather, is going from icons to formal notation, right? And then like after that, maybe some copying or some, so that's like a translation piece, right? Like we can see the one picture, know that it's a ta, and so on and so forth. And I was trying to somehow, this is a personal problem, but somehow find the equivalent in what you were saying to like how that notation piece happens, like in a Kodai inspired sequence.
Well, let me jump in and say, you could do this and it would still be a level 3 with graphic notation.
Okay.
Because it's about the level of thinking. This is under Webb's kind of philosophy. So like this isn't Victoria speaking. This is just like within the depth of knowledge kind of, school of thought. It's about the level of rigor that is necessary with the thinking. So yes, you could do this like a translation, graphic notation to standardized Western notation. And that would be like probably like a level 2 activity, but you could still do this with graphic notation, even with students not knowing standardized Western notation. And it would still be a level 3.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter whether or not it's what type of notation it is, it's still writing. Right. Which is something that we don't always think about. And then even when you get into the improvisation, composition continuum of it all too, I was just trying to, again, this is just my brain exploding whenever you talk to me, but I'm thinking about how it relates to some of the stuff that I've thought about too. But
no, I think that's a great thing, like for a level 2 to have to translate and that's what students are doing, like when they translate and make that change from graphic notation to standardized Western notation. But we're always doing it with, well, I shouldn't say always, often in that level of preparation, we're doing it with familiar patterns. We're doing it with songs that they already know and their activities they've already done, right? So even though there is a translation piece and there is like a context switching, the depth of knowledge is not like super duper deep because we're not asking them to take a huge leap into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's not a new context. Right. That's what you're saying. The fact that we haven't transferred the learning, right? Which is like when we really know students have mastered it is when they see a brand new context and then they can identify those elements and then create with it. Right. No, I love this. I think that it gives students enough of, and you were saying you would do this in partners maybe, or at least to start some of it. You don't have to. Yeah. I love that. There's one thing that's maybe off the beaten path that I want to just touch on that you mentioned about how sometimes you just throw a piece of paper at them and have them use that for the thing. I have have been so old school this year. And I think it's just because of like the nature of where I've been teaching and kind of being thrown into a place that doesn't have a ton of resources yet. But I have been doing so much just like marker on the board, get out the whiteboards. I have note cards, get a pencil, like that type of stuff. And as long as it doesn't take too much time, I just want to empower anybody listening who's thinking, I don't have these beautifully like created graphics or whatever from wherever, and it's not laminated and color printed. It doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. And it's just like, if you have the spark to do something like this, just finding the easiest, quickest way to make it happen is more important. So
isn't it amazing how we're like, I couldn't do that activity because I didn't go ahead of students and do all the work for them before they even got here. It's like, back up, girl. Like, you're not that important. Kids can draw a grid, and they can cut out their own cars. Like, get out of your way. Yes.
It's not that deep. It's not that deep.
Yes.
No, but I love this. I love this. You were so thoughtful about how you placed it together, and thoughtful in terms of the building blocks that you use, because you were looking for the building blocks. So my question then is, would there ever be an opportunity where you would let students completely dictate the words that you would use for the whole activity?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
That's a great question. Yes. And that would not, I would consider that like a 3 moving into a 4.
Okay.
Because of the extended thinking. I would say that would require much more of a depth of knowledge. Again, like, I know that 2 sounds on a beat is toddy, but can I generate my own word and decide if it's toddy or not toddy, right? Because maybe it has like 4 syllables, maybe it has 3, or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, let me quickly, has given us so much good stuff to think about, and I know we're already kind of like getting long, but that's great. So let me just add like a little nugget type layer over what you were talking about.
Yes,
so
that's good.
This can go like pre-notation, post-notation, formal notation, however you want it to work. But let's go back to what we did with the layers that I had when I shared my game in the last episode. So again, if you weren't around for that and you broke the rules and didn't listen, the first like base layer was just tree, and that's like a ta, rest. And I did that deliberately because then the ostinato is apple tree, right? And I wanted to have that kind of complementary thing happen. And then the third level was simply tapping the words of the song, right? And so that's kind of like the hook for this activity, if you will. This is our big A section if we're going to kind of stay in Orphe land and think of a class rondo. And so I want you to use the words tree and apple, and I want you to just echo me. Apple tree, apple tree.
Apple tree, apple tree.
Tree, apple, tree, apple.
Tree, apple, tree, apple.
Tree, 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 tree.
Tree, 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 tree.
Apple, 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 tree.
Apple, 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 tree.
Good for you. So this time I'm going to say it rhythm, and you just have to do something different. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do the opposite, right? If I say apple, tree, you do not have to say tree, apple, tree, apple. You just have to have at least one of the words being different. Okay, so apple, tree, apple, tree.
Tree, tree, apple, tree.
Apple, 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 tree.
Tree, tree, apple, apple.
Yeah, and so on and so forth. Okay, so then we have that, and we have to talk about how it's a big class train wreck, and nobody's going to be doing the same thing, and it's going to sound like blah, 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 right? And that's fine. So then the next question, similarly to what we already experienced with Victoria, is what is a different kind of fruit tree?
Persimmon.
Oh my gosh, you always come up with Okay, so persimmon.
Persimmon, 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 persimmon.
Apple persimmon, apple persimmon.
Apple persimmon, apple persimmon.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. What's another one?
Oh, another one already?
Another
peach.
Kind, yeah. Peach. Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. Let's say peach, peach, persimmon, peach.
Peach, peach, persimmon, peach.
Peach, peach, apple, peach.
Peach, peach, apple, peach.
Let's do one more.
I thought you were taking away persimmon because it was anacrusic. That's why I said that. But no, you're letting me keep persimmons. Thank you.
For now. You're getting ahead of me.
Okay, what about pomegranate?
Oh my gosh.
What?
No, that one's good. We can do that one. I like how I have to write it down so I can refer to it.
Right.
Pomegranate peach, pomegranate peach.
Pomegranate peach, pomegranate peach.
Pomegranate apple, pomegranate peach.
Pomegranate apple, pomegranate peach.
Okay, cool. So now we have these patterns, right? Where let's just like cut to the chase. You could copy and paste what you did to adding in these extra rhythms. And the reason why, because I do a very similar activity where I have like apples and trees, and the students, like, they can either take erasers, like I happen to have those mini erasers that are like apples and trees, right? Which we could have an argument about whether or not that's true to a TT, because it's just one apple, even though it's 2 syllables. And right, that's a whole other like philosophical debate. But anyway, so we can have students kind of create a composition that way. Or we can just keep it speech and not have to do anything necessarily with manipulatives or anything tactile. We can also translate it to formal notation just like you did. I tend to stick to just beat blanks versus the rhythmic building blocks in my class, but either or works just fine. Great. The reason why the pomegranate or the huckleberry, as I wrote down,
that's right.
Which might be a bush, right? So we can get in that argument too. But anyway, that is a great opportunity again for older beginners, right? So if you're using this same activity for older students and you want to do more advanced rhythms, maybe you have huckleberry, maybe you have coconut, I would take persimmon out because it's anacrusic, right, eventually. But we would try everything. Like every answer is a good answer. But then, but today I'm just going to circle these, and these are the ones we're going to use today, depending on what my goal was for that particular lesson. Mm-hmm. So where it goes back and relates to the passing game then is we have kind of our hook or our chorus. And if we're in pairs or we're in small groups and we're creating like our 8-beat thing or our 4-beat thing that we just repeat twice, then we have this group, that group, everybody do the hook. This group do their composition / improvisation, whatever you want to call it. That group does their thing, back to the hook, right? So we've already set up kind of that gathering moment, that unison moment that everyone can come back to. So same type of idea. Speech is just so magical for anything that you want to do, and not just rhythmic either, as we'll see soon. But
whoa,
right, you're welcome for that transition.
That's great. What a great teaser for next episode. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so Apple Tree approached a similar activity, but actually several different ways that you could approach this same idea of like durations on a beat. Definitely.
Yes. Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so the next time we get to talk about some melodic extensions.
Mm-hmm. Yep, sounds good. We'll see you there.